This is the Fuji X-E3 and I brought this to the Lofton Islands in northern Norway. As you can see, we're in the middle of winter and I'm putting this through its paces as a landscape camera. Now, usually I use the X-T20 as my backup camera to the X-T2, which I'm using to shoot this video. And one of the questions that I've been getting asked a lot is, what are the differences? Which should I choose between the X-E3 and the X-T20? Because when you look in the Fuji lineup, they do appear very similar. They're quite similarly priced, they have a similar feature set. So what are the differences between this and the X-T20?
Now, when you see these two cameras together, you can see how similar they are in terms of the size and dimension. The bodies are very similar, the height of the body, the thickness of the body, and they really do feel very similar in the hand, apart from a few style differences, which has meant some of the dials are in a slightly different place in the X-E3. They're also very similar in terms of weight. Now, if like me, you prefer the slightly bigger body of the X-T2, it's possible that you may find the grip on the X-E3 not as comfortable, it's not as easy to wrap your hand around, it's not quite as big to grip, which is the same as the X-T20 really. They're both small cameras. So it's something that you might miss if you're coming from a bigger camera, but it's part and parcel of having such a small and portable camera, and it's what makes them so easy to carry around.
One of the things that Fuji does is essentially they put the same sensor and the same image making and video producing capabilities in all of their cameras of the same generation. So this camera is going to take basically the same kind of images as the X Pro 2 or the X-T2 or the X-T20. What Fuji tend to do is differentiate their cameras in terms of the feature set that they've got. So where this differs from the X-T20 is that, for example, it doesn't have an articulating screen that the X-T20 has, but it does have Bluetooth, which the X-T20 doesn't have. But in many ways, most of the differences are quite superficial in terms of the styling, because the X-E3 is basically styled after a rangefinder camera, so it's got no prism bump on the top like the X Pro 2, and it's got the viewfinder in the top left corner here, which means that it doesn't have any dials here. So where the drive dial is on the X-T20, that's not here, and the ISO on the X-T2, that's not here as well, and those controls have been moved into buttons on the back. Now, if you like the rangefinder styling, then you're going to love this camera. Now, I really do like the rangefinder styling. I really do love the X Pro 2. I think it's a beautiful camera, but for the kind of shooting that I do, where I'm usually using big zooms like this is the 1024, I find that with the rangefinder styling, it doesn't work quite as well. They don't balance quite as well as the SLR style cameras do. And I much prefer the EVF, the electronic viewfinder on the X-T2 to any of the other Fuji cameras. So for me, while I do love visually and aesthetically the rangefinder styling, the SLR styling, the X-T2, the X-T20 work a little bit better for me. But it's been a lot of fun to use this camera. And it is a beautiful thing to use and a lot of fun to use. But let's have a look at some of the differences. So as I say, because the dial's gone, you find that a lot of the controls have had to be moved onto the back. So for example, the drive dial is now a button here. Now for me, that's a little bit of a problem because I use my secondary camera. I use this camera, my X-T20, and this a lot for shooting video. And I like to be able to just twist the dial here to be able to switch to video. It seems to be an extra step, and it's something that I've had to think about to remind myself, now how do I get to video, to press the button and then scroll all the way down to video at the bottom to switch to video. And I also really miss the articulating screen, because shooting landscapes, I tend to have the camera quite low. I shoot with the camera quite often about 1 meter off the ground, because I like to get the foreground right into the bottom of the image. Now when you've got an articulating screen, that's great, because you just flip out the screen and it means you don't have to kind of get down on your hands and knees. But since I've been using this to shoot landscapes, I've had to spend quite a lot of time and my hands and knees in the snow, getting pretty cold. So the articulating screen for me is a big loss, and I don't know, it's one of the things that I really wish Fuji would put on the rangefinder style cameras, but it's one of the decisions that Fuji seem to have made, that the X Pro 2, the X-E series don't have articulating screens. It's a bit of a pity. Like the X-T20, it's got this same bit rubbish battery and card button at the bottom, which doesn't click properly closed. Now, as I said, they did this on the X-T20. I don't know why, because it just makes it far too easy for the batteries to fall out, or for this to pop open in your bag. The X-T2 has a latch which closes properly, and I don't really, come on Fuji, that's something that you could quite easily put on the lower range cameras, and I wish that they would do that. Another difference is the lack of the D-pad. So That was something that initially I found a little bit odd because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to manipulate the menu, but it does have this joystick here, and it quickly becomes really second nature to be able to manipulate or to work your way through the menu using this joystick. And I really do like the joystick. It's something that the X-T2 has, but the X-T20 doesn't, because I much prefer to manipulate the focus point using the joystick. I find the touch screen or basically any process on the X-T20 for fine-tuning focus is a bit of a pain. This joystick just makes it a lot easier, so that is a big advantage. And overall, this is a lot of fun to use, and I've really liked using it a lot. Now, if you haven't seen the reviews that I made of the X-T2 or the X-T20, then you won't have seen me talk about the image quality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot some landscapes, shoot some video with this while I'm here in this really beautiful place, and then when I get back to Portugal, we'll have a look at the kind of quality that you can expect from it.
So let's have a very quick look at some of the images that I shot while I was in Lofton. Now, as I said before earlier in the video, it uses exactly the same sensor and exactly the same image processor as the other cameras in the current cameras in the Fuji X series range. So it's the same as the X-T2, the X-T20, the X-H1 and the X Pro 2. You're going to get exactly the same image quality. So if you've seen those cameras, then you pretty much know exactly what to expect. So this first shot here, this is just a JPEG. I tend to shoot in JPEG and RAW because quite often if it's just a snapshot like this, something that I'm just going to post on social media, on Instagram or something while I'm traveling, then I'm not going to bother editing the RAW file, and the JPEGs and Fuji are generally good enough for me to not have to worry about that. So if I just zoom into 100% here, you can see, just let the computer render it, that it's plenty sharp enough. It's really contrasty. The whites are nice and white, the blacks are nice and black. There's a lot of contrast, the colors pop. Now this is just using the 18 to 55 kit lens, so it's a cheap lens. It's not the best lens in the world, but for the kind of things that I use it for, it's a decent enough lens. And that JPEG's fine. It's something I wouldn't want to print it really big, but it's got plenty of detail there, and it's good enough to be able to post online. So let's have a look at a raw file. This is much more of a landscape shot. Now this is very flat. A lot of the color that was there in the scene at the time is pretty much washed out, because it is not washed out. It's just not there immediately in the raw file, so it would need to be pulled out a little bit. But you can see I just need to push the saturation a little bit, and you start to get some of the blues and the pinks back. And this would give me an excellent base to go on and edit this file. Now I can zoom in a little bit more to 200%. This image is actually shot with the telephoto lens with the 55 to 200 millimeter, so it's a slightly better lens than the 18 to 55 on the previous shot. And you can see there that even at 200%, there's plenty of detail. If I look at it at 100%, that's really all the way across the frame, all the way into the borders. It's got plenty of detail, and it's something that would be very easy to edit. Now, you can see some of the shadows are quite dark down here. Now, they're not clipping. If I press J, you can see that it's not really clipping, but they are quite black, so I can pull them out and you can see just the kind of detail that I'm getting there. And overall, I've generally been really satisfied with the dynamic range, on particularly since the X-T2 came out, and this has the same sensor. So the dynamic range is generally very pleasing, and it's really rare that I'm shooting in a situation where the dynamic range is far beyond the limits of the camera, and if I ever do, then I just simply bracket the shot. But generally I find with the Fuji series, the shadows are very easy to pull out, and it's quite easy to get a lot of detail in there. So let's have another look at it, and have a look at another image. This is shot with the 10 to 24, the wide angle. It was white out, we're in the middle of it was snowing at the time. So you can see, again, I'll zoom into 200%. Right in the center, it's very sharp. Against a flat raw image, I haven't done anything to this, and you can see that there's plenty of detail, plenty of dynamic range here, and certainly something that I could work with if I were editing that file. Now let's have a look at another image. It's not the best image that I've ever taken, but you can see here from pressing J that actually I'm losing quite a lot of shadow detail here, so it gives me an opportunity to have a look at the shadow recovery from the camera. So zooming into 200%, once again you can see that's plenty. It's quite sharp there. It's plenty of detail. Now this is handheld. I think any loss of sharpness actually is probably to do with the camera shake, because it was shot in quite low light. But you can see here that it's very black there. So if I slide the shadows all the way over to the right, that's to plus 100. You can see the difference that makes, how much detail I can pull back. And zooming in, we're zoomed in at 200% here now. You can see it's a little bit noisy, it's washing out a little bit, but I have pulled quite a lot of detail out there, certainly enough for me to be able to play with. There's certainly enough capacity to recover shadows for me to be able to deal pretty much with whatever I want to when shooting landscape images. Now, because the sensor and the image processing system are exactly the same as the X-T20, then the video quality is also completely identical. There's no difference between the two cameras, which is a good thing because the X-T20 and the X-E3 shoot excellent video, so much so that the X-T20 is now my primary video. It's what I shoot most of my video on, and what a lot of this video was actually shot on. One thing that it doesn't have, which is unfortunate, but it's also the same in the X-T20 and the X-E3, is it doesn't have a flat log profile. So you have to shoot in one of the inbuilt film simulations, which doesn't give you a really flat profile from which you can pull more detail, but they're generally good enough that I find that I don't need to do much color grading on them anyway. Now, just to go back and repeat myself again, the fact that you get exactly the same image quality in this camera, which is half the price of an X Pro 2 or an X-T2, make it an excellent backup camera if you're using one of those. You can switch between the two cameras, maybe with one lens on one and another lens on the other, and have no difference whatsoever in terms of the image quality. Or it just makes a fantastic entrance into the Fuji system. You're basically going to be getting exactly the same image quality that you do in the flagship cameras. And for that, I think it's an excellent camera.
So now, as you can see, the light is absolutely beautiful. It was snowing all last night, so we've got this fantastic carpet of freshly fallen snow. So I'm going to go off and do some proper pictures. I hope this review's been interesting. I hope it's been useful. If there's anything that you're not sure about, just drop me a comment and I will definitely get back to you as soon as I can. And as ever, thanks for watching and take care.